Hello, Professor O'Donoghue here. Today we are going to talk about how to control the flow in your program and specifically making decisions. How do you make decisions in your programs? So I'm going to start by asking a question. How does a thermostat work? So basically, the way the thermostat works is that there is a desired temperature that the user sets, and that's the temperature they want the house to be. And as long as it's that temperature, not much has to happen. If the actual temperature of the house rises above the desired temperature, then the furnace turns off. If the actual temperature of the house is below the desired temperature, then the furnace turns on. So that's how a thermostat works. So when you get ready to make decisions, there are some things that you have to think about. There's a process for making a decision. One is, what is the condition to be tested? Two is, what do you do if the condition is true? And three is, what do you do if the condition is false? So let's look at our example for the thermostat. The condition to be tested is whether or not the actual temperature greater than or equal to the desired temperature. That's the question. And when you ask the question, it needs to be a yes/no question. You need to be able to answer it with a yes or a no. All right. So if it's true, if the actual temperature is greater than or equal to the desired temperature, then turn the furnace off. Now, if the actual temperature is not greater than or equal to the desired temperature, turn the furnace on. And those are the steps, or those are the processes that you will take based on your conditions being true or false. So you have to make a flow chart. You always need to design your code before you ever start to actually code it. So how do you make a flow chart for a decision? Well, first of all, you ask a question, and it needs to be a yes or no question. Okay, that's how it needs to be asked, so that there's an action if the answer is yes, and there's an action if the answer is no. So basically what happens is, if the answer is yes, you take your action. In our case, it's to turn off the furnace. If the answer is no, you have an alternative action. In this case, it is to turn on the furnace. And then flow of the program just starts to continue in a vertical fashion or a sequential fashion. So the statement in C that you use when you want to make a decision is called an if-else statement. And basically, it has a particular structure, and it's like this. If, and you put your condition in parentheses, notice there is no semicolon because you're not done yet. If your condition is true, the flow of the program drops down into this true body and executes these statements. Okay? If the condition is false, it skips this true body, and it drops down to the else, and it executes the else statements. And then flow returns to a sequential manner. All right, so let's look at an example. So we have a program, or part of a program, and we are going to declare two variables, and we're going to initialize a to the value of t2 and b to the value of 1. Then we're going to ask the question, is a greater than b? If this evaluates as true, then the program should print, hello friend. If it evaluates as false, then the program should print, see you later. So let's go through. A is 2, B is 1. 2 is indeed greater than 1, so your display or your output will be, hello friend. Okay? But what if we changed it? What if we changed it and we made A equal 0? Okay? So then if we go through, A is equal to 0. Now 0 is not greater than 1. So then program flow is going to jump down to the else, and it is going to print, see you later. Okay. But inevitably, there will be situations where you want to make a decision based on more than just two choices. So what do you do then? Well, you could use consecutive if-else statements, but the more efficient way to do it is to use an if-else ladder statement. Okay. So how does that work? Well, first you ask a question, and that's your if, right? And then you have your action that happens if the if condition is met. If that condition is not met, then you have an else if. You ask another question and you set a different condition. If that condition is met, you take the corresponding action. If it's not, then you have your else finally, which is your default action. That happens, and then control flow resumes to be normal. So let's look at the structure. You always want to know the structure of your statement. So basically, if and your condition. You need these brackets. If you don't have these brackets, then the only thing that the compiler is going to execute is just the first statement after the if statement, okay? So if you want to execute more than one statement, you have to make sure you put your statements in brackets, okay? So if this condition is true, these statements are executed. If this condition is not true, the compiler jumps down to this else if condition, and it evaluates that. If it is true, then these two statements will be executed. If this condition is false, then finally it jumps down to the else, and it executes these two conditions. And your if-else ladder can have as many else ifs as you need. It's not just limited to just one. Okay, so this is the structure of an if-else ladder. Let's look at an example. Alrighty, I have a program here, and what this program is going to do is to compare two numbers, and it's going to determine if number 1 is equal to, greater than, or less than number 2. So we're declaring our variables here. We're asking the user to enter two integers, and we're being very specific. Put a space between them and then press enter so that the user knows exactly what to do. We're going to scan the values into variable number 1 and number 2. First, you're going to check to see if number 1 is equal to number 2. If it is, you are going to print result. Number 1 equal number 2. If this is not true, then control is going to skip down to this else if, and it is going to evaluate this condition. Is number 1 greater than number 2? If it is, it's going to print number 1 is greater than number 2. If this condition is false, flow of the program is going to jump down to the else, which is your default. If number 1 isn't equal to number 2 and number 1 isn't greater than number 2, then number 1 must be less than number 2. So that is what it will print, and then that will be the end of it. So let's see if that is indeed what happens. Okay, enter 2 numbers. We'll put 4, 6. All right, 4 is indeed less than 6. All right, let's run it again. Let's put 4 and, well, no, let's put 2 and 6. 2 is less than 6. All right, let's put 6 and 2. 6 is greater than 2, so that's correct. And then finally, let's make them equal. 2 and 2. 2 is equal to 2. So this works exactly like we want it to. All right, so let's go back to our thermostat example. We want to create a program that will print a message saying turn the furnace on if the actual temperature in a room is not 72 degrees. And it should say turn it off if the actual temperature is 72 degrees or higher. So before we ever create a program, we must always create a flow chart. So let's look at the flow chart. All right, so here's our flow chart. So let's think about what we need to do. Think about the variables that we need. We need the actual temperature, which we're going to set to 72. And then we need the desired temperature. Those are the variables that we need. Then is the desired temperature greater than or equal to 72? If it is, then we want to turn the furnace on because we need to get the actual temperature up. If it's not, then we want to turn the furnace off because we want the actual temperature to go down. All right, so let's write the program. Let's bring the program over. I already wrote it to save some time. All right, so we go ahead and we set our variables. The actual temperature is 72. Like we said, we have the user enter the temperature they want. We check and we see if the desired temperature is greater than or equal to the actual temperature. Then flow will fall down to this statement and it will say turn the furnace on. If the desired temperature is not greater than or equal to the actual temperature, flow of the program will come down to this else statement and it will say turn it off. So let's run it really quickly. Let's see, 76. Turn on the furnace because the desired temperature is 76, but the actual temperature is 72. Let's make it less, 68. Turn off the furnace because the desired temperature is 68, but the actual temperature is 72. Alrighty then, this is what you need to know about if-else statements and making decisions in C programming. Adios.